recommend to practice active listening as an example, to sit down one-on-one with someone, ask them a question, any question you want, let them share their answer, and then your job is to parrot back what you heard. And so the very first thing I would do, if you're hearing this, is start practicing that. Find a buddy, honestly, a spouse or a best friend, sometimes the best person, because you're probably not actively listening to them either. And so start practicing that exercise. That's where I said I've done this in couples therapy. I'm not speaking as a hypocrite. I'm speaking as a participant. And then practice sharing what they said. So as Anna mentioned, then as you feel more accomplished than this, or if you're in environments where you feel less safe to practice, you can do that in your head, right? You can do the summary in your head, but start with saying it out loud, and you're looking for what facts you can recall. So as an example of what we just did, and this is a podcast, this is not a conversation, but if this was a conversation with Jacqueline and I was practicing active listening, I should recognize I've stopped listening. And normally what I would do at that point is politely interrupt. And just say, sorry to interrupt you, but I'm stuck on what you just shared. I love that. I've never heard that before. Could you elaborate, or could we talk about that for a minute? Right? Because as an active listener, it doesn't mean I'm memorizing every word coming out of your mouth. It means I'm actively aware of when I'm listening to every word coming out of your mouth and when I'm not, right? I'm actively aware of where I am as a listener in the discussion and how well I'm listening. And the last sort of example I would give here that I hear most often when I'm coaching is, oh yes, actively listening. Of course, I actively listen. And my response is always, and this is if you've ever worked with me, how? What do you do? If you cannot give me any active behaviors, proactive behaviors that you're doing to listen actively, you're not listening actively, because active is an action word, meaning you're doing something. So if you're listening actively, there is something you were doing. Anna shared, she summarizes in her head. I shared, when I recognize that I've stopped hearing the words you're saying, I interrupt you. People parrot back, right? Another example we'll give is at the end, Jacqueline gave this example. Sounds like you have a lot on your plate, right? So you don't have to parrot back word for word. I recommend you start there because it's really interesting to see how well you do. And then you get to parroting back the summary. Can I capture the summary of what you shared and say it back to you for confirmation that I heard you accurately before moving on to another point, before moving on to the ideas in my brain? The last piece I would give is capturing back emotion, especially if they use the emotion word. I'm just really upset lately. Sorry to hear you're upset. Do you want to talk more about that? Right? Let's pause on that. So you could do anything as long as you are taking an action, you are doing a verb in your listening. So if you're actively listening, tell me how, and I will believe you. If you say, I do it naturally, I do it innately. No. We went over this in levels of listening. You're no longer actively listening. You're listening from habit, which is fine. Some people are habitually more empathetic than others. You're still not actively listening, right? It's in the word itself. So that would be the two things. Practice one-on-one with a pair who you feel trust with and you feel safety with, and you're willing to fail because you're going to the first several times you do it. And then the second piece is just, can you actually share the verbs, the actions, the behaviors that you are aware of consciously, front of mind in a moment when you're actively listening?